Hello and welcome back. Today we will be doing a pseudo tutorial, and what we are going to be talking about is the new laws from 1.3. Now that we've experienced them a little bit, the laws are technocracy, single party, state atheism, industry ban, land reform, and finally, the entire land reform section. We'll be getting into that in just a moment. If you like this video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, / hit the notification bell, and let's get into it, talking first about the two new distribution of power laws, both technocracy and single-party state. Technocracy should be best compared with oligarchy because they're virtually the same in terms of the authority, the legitimacy based on government clout, legitimacy from including head of state, government size allowance, and ideology penalty. In fact, they are identical in that form, and so you can kind of think of it like oligarchy, but instead of giving, clout to the aristocrats and the capitalists, which are generally a pair that's like antagonistic to each other, and often you are trying to kneecap the aristocrats, and this is 50% political strength. Instead of giving it to them, it is giving it to the academics, the engineers, and the officers. And the engineers in particular are going to be a trend to supporting the trade unionists, which still, despite the nerfs in 1.3, remains one of the strongest interest groups because they are giving you manufacturing industries throughput, which is really strong, and workforce ratio. And so what I've found is, first of all, it's fairly easy to get the trade unionists powerful, especially early on with technocracy. It is not as easy as like census suffrage or universal suffrage, I don't think, but what you are exchanging instead of these is you are getting quite a bit more authority. You're getting 100 authority, and it also, actually it might even be better than census suffrage. Census suffrage, you need to have a relatively high SOL, and so that is like one difference. The SOL greatly affects which suffrage is going to be high, or it's not technically SOL, it's literacy rate, which is tied to wealth as a result of tax, but more on that later. But these, or not more on that later, that's a different thing to talk about. But the ability to juice up the academics, the engineers, and the officers means that often you will get powerful interest groups in the armed forces and the intelligentsia relatively early on, and the industrialists, and this is a really nice trio to have doubled bonuses on. So I actually think technocracy is one of the better ones. If you have the option between going technocracy or pretty much any one of these, it's pretty good. The only problem is you will run into legitimacy problems later on, and if you are caring more about having higher legitimacy, something like census suffrage or universal suffrage could be better. I think that census suffrage might be one of the better ones overall, in terms of if you are trying to massage particularly the trade unionists, the industrialists, and the intelligentsia all together. And by massage, I mean you're trying to get them to 20% clout, because when you get to 20% clout, your bonuses are doubled from your happy IG stuff. And so this is kind of technocracy. You'll generally be somewhat legitimate. You don't need to have the landowners in government, whereas oligarchy often requires them being in government, or you're often set up in such a way that they have to be in government. Technocracy is, well, you still need to keep the head of state in government, but technocracy is often much, much better than oligarchy because you are eliminating the landowner element from it. Okay, so that's technocracy. Next up is what I think is probably meta, but you acquire it quite late, and that is the single-party state, which is giving you 250 authority. This is the most authority possible. It is more than autocracy. It also gives you political strength per vote, 200 legitimacy from 100 legitimacy from votes. Just for a frame of reference, universal suffrage gives you 110 per vote, and 25 based on government clout. And so this can be a little bit better for being legitimate, but single-party state does an interesting thing where it gives plus attraction of the interest groups in government. If the interest group is not in government, they absolutely get shellacked in terms of attraction, and so this makes it very, very easy for you to keep all the groups in your government relatively powerful, and by relatively, I mean relative to normal situations. Like, for example, it is often really hard to get the petite bourgeoisie powerful, that is powerful above 20% clout, maintaining above 18. Once you get above 20, they become powerful. Then once they're below 18, it decays. They are very difficult to get powerful, but with something like, with this 20% juice, they become a lot better. If we bolster right now, will it tell us the numbers? I believe I'm not sure if we can see the numbers on exactly how much bolster. No, it's just going to tell us how much more it is. I forget the exact numbers, but it's kind of like bolstering all the groups that are in power with this single-party state. This modifier is kind of what it's doing. It's not like the strongest bolster, but you can also use this authority to bolster. And so while it kind of nukes the clout of, of groups that are not in power, you can use this authority in order to do this. Often you are very, very legitimacy, because the legitimacy based on votes is pretty good at keeping it up high, and often you will have a huge block of clout in the government. And so I think that in particular, once you are going Council Republic, this one is extremely strong, because what you will usually end up with is a super powerful block of the trade unionists, the armed forces, and the rural folk. It'll be hyper legitimate. You'll be getting doubled bonuses from all of them, although I have a relatively small sample size with the amount of times I've run single party state. I really do think that this is probably the best law overall, and that, what the metagame is going to look like is early technocracy is going to be particularly strong, because it's going to be easier to transition to technocracy than it would census or universal suffrage. I think in the mid game, census suffrage might be best if you are trying to balance out the clout of the trade unionists. If you have like an SOL below 13 or 14, though, universal suffrage will be a little bit better for bringing up the trade unionists to a range when maybe you can get 20% clout on all of the industrialists, the trade unionists, and the intelligentsia, which is generally kind of, I think, the preferred configuration. Hyper late game single party state might be difficult to get both the industrialists and the trade unionists powerful, because you can't have both in government at the same time generally because of the ideological penalty. Although you have this here, minus 25% ideological penalty. I think that is the best modifier, in terms of, like, suffering the ideological penalty. Census suffrage, we have a bigger bonus, or a bigger penalty. Yeah, so it looks like, so oligarchy has minus 10, and technocracy has minus 10%, but the minus 25% is the best in terms of the ideological penalty. They put everything aside for this, the single party. And so I think single party state is probably meta. The only problem is it requires political agitation, which really is a very late game tech. It is a tier 4 tech. It gives you, so it allows for single party state, but it is locked pretty far behind, and at a time when you generally don't want to be going society tech. Maybe it's worth going society tech just for this, whereas it's in political agitation. But often, once you have reached this point, you're more focused on the mill tech and the production tech, really. And so, okay. Next up, we're going to talk about state atheism, which I think you just kind of have to compare to state religion. They are roughly equivalent. They just go in reversed. This powers up the Confucian scholars. It gives you, the devout interest group. It gives you 200 authority, and it gives you radicals and loyalists sort of situation. And this does not give radicals or loyalists, but it gives you 200 authority and instead kneecaps the Confucian scholars or the devout. If you're going to be passing a bunch of laws that make it hard to get the bonuses from the devout, which is often the case because often they don't like things that are in particular like very strong, and it's hard to get them powerful most of the time. China might actually be a notable difference because they have a different unique, their interest group is a little bit different. It doesn't hate a lot of the things that are good, but this is a bit of a digression. If you can keep the devout happy, they're actually a pretty good interest group. The problem is the intelligentsia is also really good. Generally, it's really hard to have both powerful at once unless you're playing China specifically. And so I think that if you were going to go, state religion or state atheism, that state atheism is better, but I think total separation and the migration sort of metagame is just so strong that you really don't, if you're trying to play anything remotely looking to optimize, total separation is just way better. Notably though, I think the conversion is a bit better. The 25% conversion, I think, is better than the decreased radicals and loyalists. So all other things equal, I do think it's better than state religion, but I think total separation is the way to go. The real problem with state atheism is, of course, if the pops are discriminated against, they won't enter your country. Other countries don't have state atheism, so this means you cannot siphon off migrants from any other country. But what you can do, notably, is like if you take some Chinese states, if you're not starting as China, they will start converting to state atheism, and then once they convert to state atheism, then they can migrate. And so something to this effect. But overall, I think state atheism is quite weak until they change migration or make stratified levels of discrimination such that you can siphon off pops even if you're a state atheism. All right, the next one to talk about is a bit of a meme, and it's industry ban. It is giving 50% rural folk political strength, which is actually kind of nice in some sense, because the rural folk will almost certainly be powerful under this. It also bans... let's see, it disallows multiple production methods. The production methods it's banning are ones that use heavier machinery. I don't think you gain access to tractors or stuff like that later, anything that uses motor industries. This is actually a law that I have not tried, and I think it's a meme and a dumpster fire, and so this is the only reason I haven't tried it before making this video. But it disallows heavy industry, and you can no longer build heavy industry buildings. What I take this to mean is anything that uses engines, and also anything that was steel. I believe that's the two things that require so the two buildings that give 40 urbanization per level. 40 urbanization per level. And those are the steel and the engines, if I recall correctly. But overall, it's just it's no good. You're getting it was buffed a little in 1.3.5, which is where we're on currently, with this minus minimum standard of living and this agricultural throughput. This agricultural throughput makes it so that it's not strictly worse, and it also gives increased aristocrats investment pool contribution, which I think is a little bit bigger than. No, it's not even as big as agrarianism. So agrarianism is probably just better. I could see that with this 10% agricultural throughput, there's perhaps like a multiplayer context where you would want to go this maybe, and the idea being you would feed the market the agricultural stuff, because between getting the doubled up rural folk and the 10% agricultural throughput from here, the rural folk giving you 20% when they're doubled from honest work here, you would get 30% agricultural throughput. The problem is this only applies to the farms, and by farms I mean the wheat stuff, as far as agriculture works, which is, it's just not enough. It doesn't apply to plantations. If it applied to plantations, it'd be significantly better, but there's just, I mean, this is just a meme. Also, in single player, you cannot possibly build, you can outbuild the AI by a tremendous amount. You cannot possibly, the AI is not going to create enough buy orders on their own for agricultural stuff for you to ever be able to specialize in agriculture, at least at this point in the game. The AI is just not competent enough, and so you just can't do it. And so that's kind of that for industry banned specifically. And now we have to talk about the land reform. With the entirety of the land reforms, it's changed a little bit, but for the most part, I think the metagame is relatively the same. Collectivized agriculture and homesteading. Interestingly, homesteading gives power to farmers, and this gives power to peasants, which I thought was a little bit interesting, that there was that difference there, but let's just kind of run through it entirely. Serfdom gives 50% clout to the... what are they called? They're not scholar officials normally, the landowners. And tenant farmers, which was kind of the old status quo of serfdom banned, gives 25% clout to landowners. Now, I might be mistaken, but I do believe that this 25% clout didn't used to be here, so they are going to be a little bit stickier. And what this will do is it will affect the not only the... If we come in here, we will see that this is privately owned, and this is determined by that. You see homesteading's down here, but it not only will it affect any sort of farm. I'm not sure if it affects it's not going to affect plantations in the exact same way, because there's no tenant farming here, but it's also going to affect the ownership in the rice paddies or the subsistence farms where we are privately owned, because we are on either one of these first 2 here, consumption-based or land-based taxation. Or sorry, not that. Serfdom or tenant farmers. What commercialized agriculture does is it roughly follows, once you have unlocked mutual funds, it roughly follows doing the mutual funds thing, and it will swap over it on everything, or it will allow it for everything, and I think it might force it on the industry specifically related to the farms. So I believe it might force it on everything, and it might force it on here. If you pass it, these two go to publicly traded. You cannot swap these over to publicly traded by hand if you want to now with this new system. Okay, and publicly traded makes it so the ownership is split between capitalists and also aristocrats, which is going to be better. It's going to remain better for, IPT, investment pool transfer. And so this will be good, like 800, anything below, let's call it 1 billion GDP. This is going to be a really good one. But the new one to talk about really in here is this is kind of like what we've been doing before, and this is also what we've been doing before in regards to when you go Council Republic. This is kind of the way to think about it. But the new one here on the block is homesteading, and homesteading notably gives 25% rural folk political strength, and if I'm not mistaken, rural folk also love this one, and so it's going to be easier to get their bonuses when you get homesteading on top of juicing them up, and often having a rural folk that is at least above 5% and happy is actually really good. But on top of that, it will change the ownership of the buildings. Now, if we come in here and we just take a look at, let's find a rice paddy, or sorry, a rice farm. If we take a look at homesteading in here, we will see that it is split between farmers and aristocrats. Now, the farmers will give, workers co-op is all farmers, it looks like. The farmers will give 5% of their money to the investment pool and the of the dividends of the building, and the aristocrats will give 10%. So by going from being tenant farmers to being homesteading, notably if you're on serfdom, you can't pass some of the better economic methods, so serfdom's just out. But if you go from tenant farmers to homesteading, you are going to decrease the investment pool transfer, which is generally speaking bad. But what's interesting about homesteading is it is going to kneecap the landowner's clout considerably more, because they are losing ownership of something they really care about in the rice paddies, and so it will bring down their clout a lot, which is preferable early game. And also, if you can get these guys happy and you're getting their clout in the extremely early game, logging camps are insane. So despite you getting less investment pool, I actually think homesteading is probably best. Not only does it apply to the farms and ranches, it does not apply to plantations, by the way. There is no homesteading here. But not only does it apply to these, it also applies to the subsistence farms here, where it goes homesteading, which means now you're splitting it between, the aristocrats and the farmers, instead of just all going to the aristocrats. And this is really big, and I think that the big reason why this is good is because it makes it for, if you can get onto homesteading, it makes it so more backward countries you're starting on are way easier to reform. And so if you're relatively advanced country at the start, staying on tenant farmers is probably fine. But if you're backward, moving to homesteading to kneecap the landowners seems to be quite strong, because they're going to be getting less of this 25% juice, but they also have less ownership of the buildings, because the ownership of the building is now being split into the rural folk as well. And so homesteading is a really interesting one. I think it's quite strong. I think that it is contextual, though. I think that, for example, if you're playing someone like France or UK, or someone who starts out relatively advanced, just sticking on tenant farming and moving to commercialized agriculture will be good. But I think that for a lot of countries, going straight to homesteading will be good. Notably, on some countries, especially those that start off with the moderate landowners, so for example, let's go over to Ottomans, who start out with a moderate landowner, you can currently cheese the system in order to get a landowner that will be able to pass homesteading very easily by exiling the landowner. If they're moderate, they can roll anything. So this guy, now he becomes a traditionalist. You can keep doing this until you get someone who's an abolitionist who will oppose serfdom. And so getting this in is a way to do it, to try and go for it faster. for going, for homesteading. So if we just took a look, all this plus this, that would be our pass chance if we had an abolitionist instead, once we put him back in government. Also, once you're exiled, just to kind of fully talk about what you can do here, we can invite the exile back in, and once we invite him back in, and then we put reform here. Now we're pretending that this boyo is in fact the group that we want. Once we put the landowners back in government, we can grant him leadership, and now he's in charge of the government yet again. And so that's how you do that. And so roughly speaking, just to quickly go back through it, we talked about how early on I think technocracy is incredibly strong. It helps you juice up interest groups that are preferable to oligarchy. I think it's just like better oligarchy because it juices up the intelligentsia and the trade unions more, and the armed forces as well. That one's okay, but it notably does not juice up the aristocrats and is still giving you 100 authority. This is the big attraction. Late game, I think single party state is probably best because you get a ton of authority and you can put people in that you want. One problem with single party state is if a group gets marginalized, they're just like a group that's hard to get powerful to begin with. So the rural folk, the petite bourgeoisie, the devout, these kinds of interest groups that often get marginalized and stay there. Also, to some degree, the landowners. If this happens, good luck getting them out. Even through a bolster, you're not going to be able to raise them out very, very easily. And so this is one disadvantage, but overall, I think is meta. I think state atheism in a metagame where total separation is just meta, and migration is so important. I think it's not good at all, but I do think it's a little bit better than state religion, mainly because I think that this conversion rate is a little bit better, but I don't know if there's like enough populations that are following the religion, maybe state religion's better. It's hard to... either way you go total separation. I think industry banned is a meme and is not very good at all, but perhaps in some multiplayer contexts, it's okay, specifically before you are getting, it might even fall off eventually because the inability to use tractors and stuff, which I believe it's how it works, is probably too substantive, so you can't I don't think you can use any labor-saving PM that uses an engine. So you might be able to use threshing machines, but not tractors or compression ignition tractors. Although this is maybe not the end of the world. Maybe some context in multiplayer, but I don't see it. And finally, land reform. I think that for most countries that start developed, going tenant farmers into commercialized agriculture is going to be good. But if you are relatively backward, I think going homesteading and then focusing on all the law passes you have to do is going to be quite good. And then maybe if you are still like under $1 billion GDP or something, swapping to commercialized agriculture later on will be better because it will give you more investment pool. But the bonuses on the rural folk are pretty good. If you can keep them happy, it would be pretty nice to, benefit from this 10% agriculture and logging industry throughput. Notably extremely strong early game is the logging industry throughput, and also the 10% infrastructure. Both of these are pretty strong bonuses, and so if you can keep them above 5% cloud, you're not really focusing in particular on these types of things anyways, then it's pretty good. But I really like what they do in terms of the ownership in regards to the subsistence farms, because often when you're playing a backward country, you just have an enormous amount of subsistence farms is just an enormous portion of your economy, and so changing the ownership to homesteading allows you to quickly pass a lot of reforms that the landowners would otherwise block. Anyways, I hope this video has been informative. If it is, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. If you disagree with any of my thoughts on the matter, feel free to comment below and let me know. And other than that, have a good one.